Hello, I'm George. This is GLLR Cars. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking the 2019 Honda Passport. So what is a Honda Passport? So Honda Passport is a name that Honda used quite a bit ago, back in the 90s, when they had an SUV with the name that they had dropped, and recently, as of last year, they decided to have an SUV that was not too small or not too large, and something that would fit in between the Honda CR-V and the Honda Pilot, the more popular Honda Pilot. So what Honda did is they took a Honda Pilot. So if you look at it, it's very similar to a Honda Pilot. And the differences are very, very subtle. The differences are related to how they black out the SUV's front grille. And there really is, aside from the badge, there really is hardly any chrome in the front. And this was a design. It was done like that by design. It was something that was meant to be a little bit more rugged. It was meant to be a little bit more outdoor, for the more outdoor type of lifestyle person that wanted an SUV. The other thing that they did is, instead of being a 3-row seat SUV, it is a 2-row seat SUV because it is 6 inches shorter. So on 3-row SUVs, usually there is a compromise with cargo space, because in order to add that 3rd row, usually if you really need cargo space, you need to fold down that 3rd row of seat. You need to fold them down to get a little bit more space. This car is meant to be a little bit more versatile in that, yeah, you can sit 5 passengers, which is not a lot, but you do have a little bit more cargo space because you don't have that 3rd row, despite the fact that it is 6 inches shorter. So the third and last subtle difference is the height of this vehicle. They went ahead and they raised it up compared to the Honda Pilot. I'll put here the number of inches that it's higher here on the video, but they did that with the intent of making the car more again, the audience that they target for this vehicle is active lifestyle audience, borderline, for a car that would be off-road. And the reason I use the word borderline is because this is not like a true 4x4. There is an all-wheel drive model, and then the ones that are not all-wheel drive are front-wheel drive. There is this particular one, by the way, is the front-wheel drive model. There is different trim levels. There is an EX, an EXL, a Black Series. This one right here is the EXL, which is probably closer to the top of the range in terms of the trim, and it just has a little bit more features. But again, aside from looking at a Honda Pilot, those 3 differences, the rest is very, very subtle. I think I do notice that the wheels, when you look at the design of the vehicle, it doesn't really look like a very rugged vehicle. I don't think that Honda put a lot of thought into trying to change the style a little bit. If it were me, I probably would have changed the style a little bit to differentiate it more. The wheels are something that I do like, how they came out with the grayed out pattern that they have on the wheels there, and the fender, not too much of a fender flare, I would say, but just these fender covers here, which don't stick out that much. They made it in such a way that it matches the contour of the fender, and a little bit of splash guards there. The dual tip exhausts are real dual tip exhausts, So on the rear end, the design is actually quite appealing, a car like that. And I also like how they have that little visor there, or that little wing that sticks out there in the back. So again, not really big into the rugged design, but at least it's fairly acceptable and it's very appealing to the eye. So differences that I mentioned aside, let's talk a little bit about what's under the hood. So this is a V6 that is the same V6 that they use in the Honda Pilot, the Honda Ridgeline, and then here in the Honda Passport. This V6 engine is it's used quite a bit, and it's been used for a while. It gives you 280 horsepower, 262 foot-pounds of torque. And during the driving portion of this review, we'll get to see what the driving experience is, but 280 horsepower is not a lot of power for a large SUV, but that's subjective. If it's adequate enough for someone that needs to just get around town, or are you looking to do some towing? Are you looking to carry a lot of weight? Are you going to put a lot of stuff in it? Well, this thing can tow up to 5,000 pounds, but even though that's not a lot, I don't think this was intended to tow a lot. Well, a Jeep Wrangler normally cannot tow a whole lot either. You start getting into the pickup truck segment to try to start towing a little bit more. Let's start with the key. Lock, unlock. It does have remote start, and it does give you the ability to open the rear hatch as well. One of the things that I do like that usually appears in more expensive cars like BMW products and Mercedes products is that the key can be programmed so that the car will lock as the key fob retreats away from the car. I guess that's a good way of saying it. So it will have a way of you either locking it by pressing the button, or by and then unlocking it by putting your hand inside the door handle. The one thing to notice is that you just heard that beep. As I step away, it beeped one time. As I step further, hopefully the camera caught that sound. That is the sound of just locking the doors and noticing that the key is far away. So it's a very good way of just making sure that people always get their cars if you do that setting. On the flip side to that, if you get spoiled and then you expect that, you may be driving another car and just totally leave it unlocked because now you're spoiled and not used to locking your car when you leave. But nevertheless, a very good feature. So looking in the inside, the again, this is a mid to higher trim model. It does have, and excuse the fact that it's a little bit dirty because I've had it in dirt and mud, but it does have a very good mix of regular leather and then this leathered pattern. This particular car has heated seats, doesn't have ventilated seats, but it does have the miniature holes in the area where it's going to heat up the car. It has normal mats, by the way, and then I have this rugged one here as well, just to keep the dirt out. But the steering wheel is another one that I like, how they mixed this pattern of leather here with the rest of the stitch leather that is just flat and simple. So this one gives you a little bit more of a grip. The other thing that I like is, see how the engine start button is glowing. So I'm going to press the brake, press it there. Another thing that I like is it changes colors and allows, kind of gives you that visual cue if for whatever reason you don't know if your car is on or not. Regardless, the center instrument cluster is okay. It gives you very basic information. So it's got the temperature and fuel gauges on the edges, and these are not changeable. The tach is up on the top, and it's just that bar that goes across. And then the middle area is where you get to basically set it up for viewing trip information, viewing, for instance, if you have the radio turned on. If I were to do that and I turn the radio, let me get the volume down here a little bit, and I get to show what radio station I'm at. Let me go out of here and go home, excuse. And I go to now playing. It's going to show the radio station there. I get to switch between either the presets or whatever I want to do there. If I'm in a phone call, it's going to show the contact that's in that phone. And again, very basic. It doesn't really have a whole lot here, but it's as much as you would need. Then you got your miles and your thermometer, your temperature there on the bottom. Here on the left, it just has the light controls for left and right, the economy mode to save you a little bit of gas. And I usually don't use economy mode because it's just not fun to drive. And then you have your basically your safety features here. Memory seats, by the way, these memory seats can be programmed to the specific key fob. So if I set my key fob to a specific position, if I go and try to come into the car, start the car with a different key fob, it will not remember those. So it's a very good feature, by the way. By the way, the seats also have the traditional up and down, left and right, and the lumbar support. So not much more there. Again, I think it's very basic. Your steering wheel is got it's like your typical Honda design, where it has this shape with the holes here. I think nowadays most steering wheels, you know that you cannot hold it at the 9 and 3 o'clock positions, because you usually have to make room for buttons and either at the 9 and 3 o'clock positions, or some cars will do it a little bit lower, where there will be like a design that allows for more buttons to fit, maybe at the 8 and 4 o'clock position. But the important thing is that the big opening up on top, at least the big area there, so you have a good view there. In terms of the infotainment system, hasn't changed much from what Nissan does with some of the other cars. It's very clean, it's very straightforward. You can navigate very easily. You can use your typical Apple CarPlay, Android Auto settings there. It is not wireless though. You do need to connect to it using the provided USB. It does have the 12-volt cigarette lighter type connector there, little cubby hole. These are your heated seats. Your environmental controls, I like the fact that they're physical, and at the same time it does have the ability to just move, and it's dual zone, by the way. But if you come out of zinc, I can race it with this little tab, which is, in my view, is better than the knob. Or I can just put sync here, but very intuitive. You can turn it on, off, and really in a snap. So very clean interface there. In terms of storage, you got the cup holders, and then you have this very large storage area that basically is a slider. By the way, this is a very nice finished material that is not just the color, it does have texture to it. If you just feel with your fingers, they're like small grooves that you feel as you touch this. The slider is very positive. Lots of junk in there, but as you can see how deep the space is, you have room for even like a laptop in there, or several laptops rather. This right here is something that Honda started doing with its cars, where instead of a shifter or a knob, it basically does it. Even something like the NSX, the Acura NSX, or in some other parts of the world they call it the Honda NSX. It has the parking, which is a button to press and it'll put it in red, these two LEDs there. The reverse, you have to kind of pull in it that way and it will put these in green. The neutral, you press it down and it's going to put that in red. And then for drive, if you press it down the first time, it's going to put it in drive mode. The second time you press it, it changes it to sports mode. It also has a snow mode, which changes here. And then finally it has the automatic start stop, the automatic engine off whenever you're, let's say, at a red light. So if you press it here on the dash, it's going to show you that it was disabled, and it does show the icon in the upper left hand corner. So very clean, by the way, very big, and I got a lot of junk in there, but it's a very big glove compartment there as well. In terms of up on top, big visors type that you can slide over on the side as well, and another area here for glasses. And if you open it about halfway, it allows one to see in the back seat, sort of like if you have children and whatnot. And this is something that came over from the Pilot. Here's where you have your moonroof controls, sunroof, moonroof controls, and your lights. So in terms of seating in the back, this is where this car does very well. So the first thing to notice is I have the seat position there further back than usual. However, the space that shows here looks still generous. So this chair is more where a driver would be, and if you notice, it's still a little bit slanted back. It's still in like a resting position, and I still have plenty of space here, and not just on my knees, as well as head space. And it is huge. It's almost a foot above my head there. Furthermore, these seats, they recline. So it does have a 40-60 split recline. So you can move it that way. And of course they fold down, but the important thing is that they recline. So you're able to kind of lean back a little bit if you're in the back seat. So something that I didn't expect, and it's very good. Here it does have these little window shades for the sun. They're not like in some expensive cars where they are powered. You do have the little tab that you lift up and then hook it on these hooks up here. And on a very sunny day, that adds a little bit more to keeping the vehicle cool. One thing that I would have preferred is for the sunroof to come all the way back, or at least a little further back, to make it a little bit more open. But nevertheless, it's very spacious and it's very comfortable back here. Down here you got your air conditioning vents, a little cubby hole here, and then you have the USB controller. One thing I like to point out is that many times whenever I'm driving, this may not be a big deal for many, but I noticed it because many times I wear boots. And if you're wearing boots, and I'm size 11, so average size shoe, because of the boots, when I'm using the pedals, and let's say that I have my pedal on the accelerator and I go and lift to go to the brake, because the brake sits higher than the accelerator, many times I bump a liner that is right above the pedals, and I do it with the tip of my boot, and not enough to become annoying, but enough for me to notice it. And I'm wondering if someone is, I don't know, size 12 or 13 and they wear boots like I do, and would that become an issue where they're bumping it all the time? I'm not sure, but it's just something to point out. Looking at the hatch area, I'm sure that you can open it with the key or open it by pressing the button here on the left. And since it's powered, all you got to do is just hit that one right there and it will come back. This is a huge amount of space. So even if I don't fold those seats down, you can get probably about 8 pieces of luggage here if you stack them up. This one doesn't have a shelf, but has the ability to put a shelf on here. And you got hooks here for nets, as well as hooks here on the floor, on the front and the back. Furthermore, there is an extra space here at the bottom where if I lift up, it's got enough for some grocery bags, and you can put a few additional tools and items in there. So not bad either. And then if you need to fold the seats, you just press here and they drop back on each side. Like I mentioned, they're 40-60. Now to bring him back up, this is not going to, there's only to fold them down. To fold them back up, I need to go around and pull them up. But again, this amount of space is absolutely huge. There are these very nice armrests that they did where they lock up in the up position, then you can show them all the way down, and then you stop in the position you want to stop it, and then there's support there. And then to reset it, you go all the way back up and bring it back down, and you stop there. Again, these are not as common as they used to be a few years back, but I do believe that it does add a level of comfort that the alternative to that would have been to make this center console at about the height of where the elbow would rest, so that you would be able to do that. So I guess they didn't want to make it any deeper and they stopped there. Something else that I'm picky about is that if you are going to rest your hand, or rather your elbow there, your hand should reach the steering wheel, at the very least at the 4 o'clock position, and that is how it is for my hand in this driving position. This particular car does have a telescoping wheel or steering wheel, and which is very nice. The one thing is it does not tilt. Driving impressions as I go through this dirt road and just a little bit rugged, because of the very large wheels and the elevated position of the car, it feels like you're in a truck, that you can go over potholes and bumps and dents easily, and you don't feel it that much. In terms of the punch, I would describe the acceleration as adequate. It is very difficult to say an SUV to be punchy unless you're talking the luxury segment, where they do pack them with higher performance engines, or in the case of the Ford Explorer, that new ST model that does pack up to 400 horsepower. But in terms of you're using this car to get around, and let's see, I'm just making a turn here, kick it. It is adequate. It is not intended to be race car performance. So 260 horsepower on an SUV, mid-size SUV like this, would give you the ability to do what you need to do. Again, I mentioned it can tow up to 5,000 pounds, so it's not really a slouch. You look at the performance in terms of 0 to 60 times, a car like this will do it in 6.6 seconds. And if you look at the other cars, that really tells you how punchy it is. And it's a combination of the power of the engine and the weight of the car. So how punchy it will get, it will respond based of, you know, how much power does it take to move that weight. In terms of the ride, I talked a little bit about that. It handles potholes and rugged roads quite well. And I would say better than a truck would do it, but you do have that truck feel to it because of how high you sit and because of how big the wheels are. It is a little bit of a compromise, but it does feel very good. In terms of the steering, it is a car-like steering. So if I change lanes here, it doesn't have the amount of feedback you would get in a more expensive product, but it is refined enough for a vehicle in this price range. The view out the window is like any SUV. It is quite good. You are surrounded by glass as expected, and because the driving position is high, as with any SUV, the transmission is one that does the job of changing the gears when you want to. If I drive it in just normal mode, it does shift when it needs to. It does have paddle shifters here. They are plastic paddle shifters, and if I put it in sports mode and I start engaging the paddle shifters, which I've done, it doesn't really give you that much of a difference. What you end up doing is you end up basically running the car in a lower gear, which does give you a little bit more responsiveness when you punch it. But aside from that, it's not really, it doesn't transform the car like you would see in some other products that are in a different price point. So although this vehicle does not have the parking sensors as you approach an obstacle, if I have it in reverse, which is what I do right now, and I am going back, it has your regular reverse camera like any other car. I'm going to go ahead and approach this pole on purpose just to demonstrate something. The camera that allows you to back up has the wide angle, has the slightly narrow angle, and then it has this top view that tells you exactly where the bumper is from that pole, so I can get very close before obviously I get too dangerously close to a pole, even though I don't have the sensors, and that's because of this feature right here. So this driving mode, which allows you to do regular drive, Sports drive, if you hit it a second time, you have to see the instrument cluster to see where you're at, as well as snow allows you to make the two combinations of drive sport versus snow or non-snow, which would be normal. So I can go here, put it in drive, put it in sports, leave it in drive, go from normal to snow. So now I was in drive snow, go to sport, and now as you can see there is an S with the snow in it, so you can be in sports and snow at the same time, if that makes any sense. One thing that I like is it does have a volume knob that Honda had actually done away with it in the past, but many people didn't like it and everything was touchscreen. But at least for the volume, you do have a knob that you get to move. Is very responsive there as well. In the vehicle, with the quality of the screen, the resolution of the screen is quite high. Just by looking at the Apple CarPlay, I'm used to seeing those same icons on other screens, and they don't look as crisp and sharp as they do in this car. Okay, so after the driving section portion of this review, I was able to tell that it's a very comfortable, very well built, very enjoyable drive for an SUV, depending on what your expectations are. If your expectation is to have something that is very sporty and very punchy, then you're looking at the wrong car. If you're looking something that is going to give you around town, have a way of being a little bit more rugged than your typical SUV, have enough capacity without sacrificing the look, so it's not going to look a little bit too bloated, this is a vehicle that you should take a look at. It is very well built. They last very long. They have a good history because of what we know from these engines that being built for some of the other models of Honda, and the fact that they gave it a little bit more of a rugged look may persuade someone who would otherwise not look at a model like this to go check it out. And if you're talking price, let's talk price a little bit about these. I believe that from the point of view of what you can get for a car like this, the EXL model, which is what this is, starts at $36,000. The way that this one is equipped is a little over $37,000. You buy it brand new, again, with the issues that are going on now where there's a big lockdown and you can't really be going to a place where there's a lot of people, then the car companies are going to be forced to offer incentives and offer deals for people, and this would be perhaps one of those cars that would allow you to benefit from one of those deals. And again, $37,000, the mid to high tiered. If you compare this to something like a Jeep Cherokee, you do get a little bit more in the Cherokee because the Grand Cherokee is a little bit more rugged. It's got off-road capabilities are better, but you're talking a vehicle that goes north of $40,000. Again, it is a matter of choice, so whether you go for price, you go for capabilities, in the end it is that compromise that you looking to seek. The driving position, and because you're driving so much higher, and the width of the vehicle, this vehicle is very, very wide, it does give you that feel that you're almost like in a truck. And that's a very good feel if you're coming from having driven trucks, or you like the truck feel without the truck ride. And that's one of the reasons why I like a car like this. The Honda Passport is definitely a car that I would recommend. So what boxes does the Honda Passport check? Well, it checks the box of comfort, passenger capacity, cargo capacity, convenience, price. If you were to argue that $37,000 MSRP for an EXL model is a good price, if you look at the competition, it's right on par where it should be. If you look at another car that this would compete, the Ford Explorer has a similarly equipped vehicle about $43,000. And if you start getting into the sporty one like ST, you're talking north of $50,000. But again, you do pay for the engine. You do pay the price for the performance. The interior quality is very good, and known for good reliability, does give you the peace of mind that if you're going to have a car for a long time, this would be a car to consider. My name is George. This is GLLR Cars, and as always, drive safe.